Wizards of the Coast has just admitted that they've made a mistake with the newest Baldur's Gate spoiler card. On top of that, they've also announced a brand new product, the Magic the Gathering 2022 Starter Kit.
Magic. I am a wizard! History. I'm an old wizard! The Magic Historian. My bones hurt.
Greetings, owners of fine luxury cardboard rectangles. My friends, I hope the day finds you well, because we have gathered for another glorious installment of Mega Magic News. Not only do we have a brand new product to talk about in the form of the 2022 starter kit with a bunch of the contents revealed, but we also have a brand new Baldur's Gate spoiler, which is exciting because it's a new card, but also interesting because Wizards of the Coast has made a mistake with this one. So, up on the screen, you are going to see Zevlor, which is a really fun name to say. It really does feel villainous. Now, admittedly, I have no idea if Zevlor is a villain, right? His casting cost and his name kind of give me that vibe, but as far as I understand, this is a character from the third Baldur's Gate video game, and I honestly don't really know anything about him because I've never played that game. But in terms of the card itself, it's 1 red, 1 black, 1 blue, and 1 generic mana for a beefy 4/2 legendary Tiefling warrior. Now, Tiefling is a type of race in Magic the Gathering that hasn't really been used much because it's only been introduced since they brought Dungeons and Dragons into Magic. If you didn't know, for the longest time, even though there was a massive overlap between D&D and Magic the Gathering, Wizards of the Coast made an intentional decision to keep particular things specifically for Dungeons and Dragons. And that's why we never used to get things like Beholders in Magic the Gathering. We never had Tieflings or anything of that nature before, but the doors have been blown wide open as D&D has been merged into Magic. And since I'm somebody who loves the high fantasy swords and sorcery style stuff, that's a perfect fit for me. But anyways, back to the card itself. It is a 4/2 Hasty Boy, and it has the ability pay 2 and tap it. When you next cast an instant or sorcery spell that targets a single opponent or a single permanent an opponent controls this turn, for each other opponent, choose that player or a permanent they control, copy that spell, and the copy targets the chosen player or permanent. Man, when you read that, it does feel word salady and complex. The idea behind this is almost like a pseudo radiate concept. If you're not familiar with radiate, it's an older Magic spell that basically says pick a spell that's on the stack and make a copy of it for everything that it could copy. So if you literally had a spell that just says do 3 damage to any target and you played the radiate on it, now everything in play, every player, planeswalker, creature, everything that could be targeted is getting hit with it. This is a miniaturized version of this, basically. So what happens is, instead of hitting everybody it can, it just kind of hits across the board. It does feel more like a radiate effect when you're specifically targeting players, right? Because what happens is this is going to hit each one of your opponents. Oh, I'm playing a spell on you that says you have to discard 2 cards and sack 2 creatures. Oops, my bad. Actually, it's everybody who has to do it, right? So when it comes to player targeting effects, this is really, really strong. When it comes to permanent targeting effects, it's still very strong, but not quite as strong, right? If you play a destruction spell, I'm going to destroy your 1 target creature over there. Then boom, all of a sudden, hey, now I get to pick a creature for each of my other opponents too. So each of your destruction spells basically now hit each of your opponent's creatures. Not all of them, but 1 of each, right? And this feels like a very powerful and interesting effect, right? Now you may be thinking, what is the mistake that Wizards of the Coast has made? Well, they left a word off the card, and it's a very important word because it functionally changes how the card works. So this card is going to be receiving basically day 0 errata. Before it's being released, it is being errata to fix how it works. So what you need to do, take a look at the first basic sentence of this. So it says, when you next cast an instant or sorcery spell that targets a single opponent. So right there, you need to insert the word only. So the actual wording goes like this. When you next cast an instant or sorcery spell that targets only a single opponent or a single permanent. So it can't be both. And that actually genuinely changes the power level of it. Without the word only in there, that means you can have a spell that's targeting a single opponent or a single permanent that meets both those conditions. So you could technically be targeting an opponent and one of their permanents, and based on the wording of this card, it would function properly that way, right? But it's not supposed to do that. You're only supposed to be able to either choose your opponent or one of their permanents. That's it. You're not allowed to do both. So they're including the word only there to fix this. Now, I have kind of a theory about what's going on here. I'm going to run it by you guys, and you let me know if maybe I'm getting a little too conspiratorial here. But there's a part of me that wonders if these sort of errors are somewhat intentional, right? Because I was looking at this and I was thinking about the Lagrella issue that we ran into previously, where it basically says what it's supposed to do is it's supposed to say you're choosing one creature for each of your opponents. But the way it's worded makes everybody think you can hit every creature on the board with it, right? So we have a situation where the rules aren't being as tightly maintained in terms of the wording on the cards we're dealing with. Now, you can turn around and say, you know what? They're not putting as much money into development. That is definitely a valid thought to have, because it certainly does appear that Wizards is spending less time and money on research and development for this kind of stuff, right? But at the same time, all the mistakes that I've been seeing on cards all make the cards more powerful. And so casual players who don't care about errata and don't look up like online, what's the new wording of this card? Have they changed this card? Are going to play the cards as they read. And all these mistakes we're seeing in current times just make the cards more powerful. So Wizards is in essence getting to print more powerful cards and pushing the power creep level up further, but at the same time going, no, because all you guys who play by the real technical rules and pay 100% attention will know about this errata. So it's almost like having your cake and eating it too. You get to push the power level, but then you get to kind of hide it under the errata. Now I know, like I said, that's a little bit of a tinfoil hat level stuff. It probably is literally, Occam's razor says, simplest explanation, probably the correct one. It's probably just starved for resources. The departments that are in charge of testing and all that, they're not doing it to the same level, right? And basically I think as well what could be happening is when you're somebody who's making these cards or whatever, it's the same situation as the author who's writing a story. You can't see the mistakes that you've made. You know how the card's supposed to function, and when you read the card, it functions that way to your mind, but you're missing a key word that changes everything. So it hinges on the term only here. Now, I don't know what's going on over there, whether this is intentional or not. So I'm gonna say officially that I think it's just a mistake, but they may be trying to pull the wool over our eyes. Now, let's move on to the Starter Kit 2022. If you're not familiar with this, this is the newest iteration of a product that Wizards has done at least twice before. The idea behind it is it's supposed to be, obviously, an introductory product to Magic the Gathering. You end up getting 2 separate decks with it, fully ready to go. Now, these decks are 100% standard legal. They are comprised of cards from the Midnight Hunt, Crimson Vow, Neon Dynasty, and New Capenna sets. So there's no real worry about this deck rotating anytime soon, although let's be real, when it comes to starter decks that Wizards of the Coast develops, they are going to be definitely underpowered because they want players to have fun getting into the game, but they also want them to hit that brick wall of, whoa, I'm not nearly as powerful as these other players. My deck is not up to snuff. I need to start acquiring cards. So basically what they do is they break it down into 2 different decks. We've been given a sneak peek at some of the cards that are included there. So on the white side of things, you have the deck that has the Welcoming Vampire, which this is going to be the biggest card in the entire starter set. This one is worth about $5 right now. And honestly, because of this, the card's just going to tank down to nothing, right? I wouldn't be surprised to see it drop back down to being like a $2 or $1 card, but it is a very solid card, right? 1 white and 2 get you a 2/3 flyer that says whenever you cast 1 or more creatures that have power 2 or less, you get to, or sorry, whenever one of those enters the battlefield. It's not even when you cast. My brain goes cast because I feel like just entering the battlefield is so much stronger, but that's legit. how it works. Whenever you have one or more creatures with power 2 or less enter the battlefield under your control, draw a card. And it triggers only once each turn. That's what keeps this card from being absolutely bonkers. But this is the biggest, in my opinion, part of this starter kit, right? You also get the Extraction Specialist, which is 1 white and 2 for a 3/2 human rogue. This one's weird. Honestly, somehow I missed this card in the new Capenna spoilers. It's got interesting flavor, right? Like it lets you bring something back from your graveyard that costs 2 or less. So you bring a creature back from your graveyard that costs 2 or less, but it puts the stipulation on it that it can't attack or block. So this is essentially like a rescue mission. This chick is like, Liam Neeson, I have a very special set of skills. I don't know how I missed this card because I actually really like this flavor and it makes perfect sense for somebody like this to exist. The fact that they're like a human rogue, it's like, I'm a rogue, I'm an extraction specialist, I literally go against the crime families, and that's what makes me a rogue, because in a way, the crime families are basically the law structure of New Capenna. So to be roguish and outside of that, I don't know, the flavor on that is really cool. I mean, it includes Seven-Tail Mentor as well. That's not terribly exciting, right? That's just a whatever common. The artwork on it is pretty good, though. So them choosing to use that as the main display piece for the box set is not a terrible idea, right? But ultimately, it ain't an exciting card. So let us move on to the red-green spoilers that we have. And interestingly enough, we have the rares tucked in the back here this time around, right? It's like, okay, what's going on with the Topiary Stomper and the Ascendant Pack Leader and the Thundering Raiju? Is Thundering Raiju rare as well, actually? I can't even tell from here. It looks like the symbol might be gold and washed out. So maybe these are all rares, right? But this one is going to be based around the modified concept because the Thundering Raiju is 2 red and 2 for a 3/3 haste. Whenever it attacks, you put a +1/+1 counter on target creature you control. Then it does X damage to each opponent, where X is the number of modified creatures you control. And you have other stuff in there that cares about modified creatures too. Like Ascendant Pack Leader is an interesting mix to toss into one of these modified style decks, right? Because it's a 1 mana for a 2/1, but if you already have a permanent on the table that has a mana value of 4 or more, it comes out as a 3/2 for 1 mana. I do like the fact that if you get it later game, it comes out a little bit boosted, right? And then also, whenever you cast a spell that costs 4 or more, you get to slap another counter on it. So it starts out as a nice early threat, and later on in the game can be relevant as well. Now, the Topiary Stomper, for me, that's an interesting choice because it doesn't really feel like it fits into like the modified concept, but it is a very solid card, right? It's only 2 green and 1, and it's a 4/4 vigilance. You can't see its power and toughness on the screen, but it is a 4/4 vigilance. And when it enters the battlefield, you search your library for a basic land card, you put it onto the battlefield tapped, then shuffle. So this thing helps accelerate you up to the 7 lands that you need? You need an absurd amount of lands out to be able to attack or block with it, right? So it's definitely one of those weird sort of, I don't activate unless you meet my conditions, but ultimately feels really good from the perspective of, whoa, I get a 4/4 body for 3 mana, and when it comes out, I get a land. It's one of the interesting cards to give to a beginner because you're going to have the contrasting emotions where a beginner is going to be excited about the big power and toughness, the cheap casting cost, the vigilance, and the grabbing a land, but they're going to be put off by the fact that they can't use the creature right away. And honestly, this feels like a higher level of complexity than Wizards of the Coast used to go with when it comes to starter products. Starter products before used to be very vanilla with very few abilities. And ultimately, I think that was doing Magic a disservice because part of Magic's draw, at least in my opinion, is actually the complexity of the game. Now, these decks not only are what I'm trying to say here is, along with these decks in the starter kit, you get digital versions of these decks as well. It includes arena codes for both of the decks, and if this works like previous ones, those arena codes will be special in that they are double use, which is a really smart move on Wizards' part, right? You get little Billy. Little Billy goes out and buys the starter kit, and he goes, come on, Bammy. And Bammy's like, okay, let's play. So they sit down, and Billy and Bammy, they grab out their little decks, they splorp them up, but then Bammy's mom goes, Bammy, you gotta come home right now. What are you doing at Billy's house? And then Billy's like, don't worry, bro. Here you go, Bammy. Take these arena codes. I already plugged them into my arena game. Now you can have the decks, and we can both play either deck online against each other too. And now you can go home. See you later, Bammy. You know what I mean? Like, that's a smart move for a starter product. But my friends, that wraps up the news. I hope you enjoyed it. You can let me know your thoughts if you want to, or tell me your favorite kind of toast. I don't know, doesn't matter to me. Thanks for coming by. Big shout out to all my patrons, and I will see you, my friends, in the next video.